I'm Ted Cho, and I currently serve as treasurer for the Diocese of Massachusetts. On behalf of the Budget Committee, I'm here to give a brief introduction to the 2026 budget, approved by Council, and which will be presented to Convention for its approval in November. The budget book this year is 65 pages. As in past years, there is a lot of detail included in the budget book, describing how we will use the resources entrusted to us to implement the strategic priorities in support of our mission statement. I hope this presentation will ease your introduction to the 2026 budget book and encourage you to read through it ahead of convention. On page 6 of the budget book, you will see the budget resolution that will be put before convention. Moved that the 240th Annual Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Massachusetts approve the budget of revenue and expenses for 2026 as summarized on page 9, including the individual parish and mission assessments and approved adjustments for 2026 listed on pages 18 through 21. In addition, a portion of Canon 10 is reprinted, which describes the budget process as mandated by our Constitution and canons. Next, on pages 7 and 8, you'll find our mission statement and strategic priorities, which, per our canons, drives the choices found in this budget and which was newly drafted this year. As you know, we have been engaged in a diocesan-wide visioning process. This process was commissioned by our bishop and, with the assistance of the consultant's ministry architects, we gathered input from a wide variety of sources, including work that we did at the beginning of the bishop search process, focus groups that had over 315 participants, the Holy Cow Landscape Assessment Survey, which had over 800 responses, a leadership visioning summit, as well as input from the Standing Committee and Diocesan Council. This has resulted in a new diocesan vision, which is composed of a newly articulated set of core values, a mission statement, and strategic priorities. We will be asking our whole diocese to adopt this as our diocesan mission for our next phase of our life and ministry together at the convention in November. The strategic priorities most strongly inform our funding choices in the budget, so let's review them in more detail. They are strengthening worshiping communities, reframing communication, evangelism, and prophetic witness, advancing formation, discipleship, and leadership development, and improving diocesan stewardship and asset management. These strategic priorities will guide our work in the coming 3 to 5 years, which will require both adaptive and technical changes. To help us move forward as a diocese on these priorities, our consultants are now beginning to facilitate an implementation process for us. Each strategic priority will have an implementation team, which will work to engage others in our diocese around particular goals tied to each priority. This will enable us to widen the circle of those involved and responsible for change as we seek, while also maintaining programs and respecting the roles of each part of our diocesan leadership system. Let's see how the 2026 budget interacts with each of these priorities. First, strengthening worshiping communities. When we look at the big picture of our worshiping communities, we have 50% the number of members in our diocese than we did 20 years ago. And we have about 88% the number of congregations. So, in aggregate, we have half the people trying to sustain nearly the same number of communities. We have heard how our congregations and their leaders are struggling to meet this challenge. This strategic priority attempts to respond by focusing more diocesan attention and infrastructure support on congregations, where our ministries directly impact our community and their leaders. We also want to get better as a diocese at providing tools and support for congregations seeking to collaborate, share clergy, and who want to consider merging. In the 2026 budget, we have increased funding for resources for congregation, resources for clergy, as well as grants to Hispanic, Asian, and African ministries. We also anticipate hiring a part-time Hispanic missioner. Next, reframing communication, evangelism, and prophetic witness. At this moment in history, it is more important than ever that we proclaim the gospel to the communities of Eastern Massachusetts, to proclaim the justice of God to a broken and hurting world, to provide a generous and abundant welcome to life in Christ. In support of this priority, the budget includes staffing for a new senior role, the Canon for Communications, Witness, and Evangelism, a full-time communications specialist, and a part-time missioner for justice and witness. The third strategic priority is advancing formation, discipleship, and leadership development. It calls that we support our worshiping communities to become places of local formation to children, youth, young adults, and older adults, and to provide leadership development programs to clergy and lay leaders. In addition to the current programs and staffing, the 2026 budget provides for hiring 1.5 full-time equivalent missioners for formation. The fourth strategic priority, improving diocesan stewardship and asset management, is not just about money, but all of the resources which God has entrusted to our diocese. To that end, we will work to utilize our real estate assets to best serve our mission and our ministries, and to better align the size and shape of our volunteer committees and boards, so we can be faithful stewards of the time and talent of our staff and volunteers. In the 2026 budget, we are increasing the investment in property stewardship. As we've discussed, our core values, our mission statements, and our strategic priorities informed our funding choices in the 2026 budget. However, since the budget preparation process started at the beginning of the year, well before the results of the vision process was completed, the structure of the 2026 budget is very similar to the 2025 budget. And so, the 2026 budget is very much a transitional document. As we learn how to more fully live into our mission and our strategic priorities, these insights will surely result in more changes to the structure of the 2027 and future years' budgets. And so, here is a pie chart of the expense side of the 2026 budget. Like many congregations, a very large percentage of our budget goes to personnel costs. If you add the compensation and benefits, which is 45%, and professional fees and consultants, which is 5%, it is half our budget. Compared to the 2025 budget, compensation and benefits has increased by $445,000. Roughly half of that increase was due to cost of living and insurance premium increases, and half was new staffing to increase our capacity to meet our strategic priorities. We've discussed how we've increased spending to match with our diocesan vision and strategic priorities. There have been some areas where this shift in focus has resulted in decreases, including in congregational development open grants and mission initiative grants funding. This is consistent with the strategy of providing infrastructure and congregational development tools which will strengthen all congregations across the diocese, and less focus on grants which require applications and which serve a few targeted communities. Of course, we will never eliminate our grant programs, and in fact, some areas of congregational grants are increasing relative to the 2025 budget. We also know that there will always be some congregations serving marginalized and immigrant communities without which our diocese would be significantly diminished, and so which we will always support. This slide shows a pie chart of the income side of the 2026 budget. Both the income and expense pie charts can be found in the budget book. As in past years, over half the income comes from assessments and contributions in lieu of assessments from congregations in our diocese. The next largest source of money is fund draws from our diocese agency and trust funds, which is 28%, plus grants from the draw from bishop-directed funds, which is 7%. Despite the fact that we have not changed the assessment formula, which has remained the same for 5 years, we have been blessed that assessment income in 2026 is projected to increase by 8.8%. Some of this increase can be attributed to some congregations seeing increases in their operating income as we continue to bounce back from COVID. This is reflected in trends of parochial reports over the past few years. Speaking of the assessment, as many of you probably know, there were a number of changes in how operating income is reported in the 2024 Episcopal Church Parochial Report, both in what data was collected and the definition of those data fields. Because of these changes, our finance team created a supplementary form to collect data which was no longer collected via the parochial report, hosted group Zooms and offered individual consultations, and proactively reached out to congregations whose assessments were set to rise by more than a certain threshold, asking if they would like support from the finance office. All told, to date, the finance office has worked with over 40 congregations to revise their preliminary information. In the 2026 budget, we set aside a generous amount of money for assessment adjustments. Please reach out to the finance office if you have any questions about your congregation's assessments. Finally, I'd like to give thanks and acknowledge the many people who have contributed to the 2026 budget. All told, over 50 people representing a cross-section of our diocese, lay and ordained, from congregations large and small, in all 12 of our deaneries, have helped to create this budget. In particular, I'd like to thank Bill Parnell, who has served as canon to the ordinary until his retirement in May. Bill has been a faithful servant and partner to the Budget Committee the past 10 years. I am so grateful for his empathy, faithfulness, and deep knowledge of the ministries in our diocese. I also want to thank the Budget Committee, the Mission Initiatives Committee, CFO Deb Thomas, Controller Tom Hamill, Bishop Julia Whitworth, and Canon to the Ordinary Chris Wendell. This year's budget would not have been possible without them. Thank you for your kind attention. I hope this presentation has been helpful. Members of the Budget Committee and I will be happy to answer any questions you might have at the upcoming pre-convention forums.